Today I'd like to talk about residential schools, Indian day schools, and boarding schools. So residential schools were funded by the federal government but ran by the churches and were often located in remote areas. And these children were stolen from their families. Yes, stolen. People would come to the door and take your children and bring them somewhere where you didn't know and put them in a school where they would be abused, and a lot of times some of the families would try to hide their children. Some families actually went to jail for hiding their children, and some actually were able to hide. So this is something that's important to recognize, is that these children were stolen and they were not able to go back home every single night to their loved ones. I couldn't even imagine. Now, I also want to talk about Indian day schools. Now, Indian day schools ran during the same period as residential schools, except these schools were already in where Indigenous people were remotely living. My mother, she attended Indian day school in Moose Factory. And this is something where a lot of people seem to think that Indian day schools are better, because they get to go home every night. But the reality is that the abuse continued in Indian day schools. A story that touched my heart was hearing about my mother when she was attending Indian day school. She was looking down, doing her homework, and the teacher came by and seen that her beautiful long black hair was in front of her face and came by with a pair of scissors and chopped my mother's bangs off, And hearing this from her friend not too long ago really broke my heart, just thinking of the things that children, again, would go through, and then have to go home at night. And the parents aren't able to do anything about it. Now, the last one is boarding school. And a lot of people think that this didn't happen in Canada, but you're wrong. It actually happened way later in life. A lot of my friends are from going to boarding school. So especially for the ones living in remote areas, boarding school, my mom attended boarding school as well, where she was taken from her community and brought to an urban area to attend high school because there was no high school in her area. And in doing this, they would live with families like billet families, families that would take in these children so that they could go to school and further their education. I also know many of my friends who attended boarding school because I lived in Timmins. A lot of the James Bay high school students came down and they attended boarding school, so it's just a different form of, schooling that impacts Indigenous people in a wrong way. Now, telling you all of these, I also want you to know that I myself attended public school during the times that there was residential schools and Indian day schools and boarding schools. And I'll tell you that we were still segregated in these public schools. I remember that during English class, I would be sent to a different room with all the other Indigenous peoples, just so that we weren't with the mainstream. And I don't know if it was because they thought we weren't smart enough or because they wanted to continue to not make us any smarter, because once you start falling behind in something like that, it's very hard to catch up. So, these things affected many Indigenous peoples and many generations. So it's something that we need to be considerate of. And, I'm really glad that I'm able to share with you from a personal perspective.